If Edison had a needle to find in a haystack, he would proceed at once with the diligence of the bee to examine straw after straw until he found the object of his search. I was a sorry witness of such doings, knowing that a little theory and calculation would have saved him 90% of his labor. Nikola Tesla. I'm telling you, Doppler radar steers the storms. Doppler radar steers the storms. All right. They're not supposed to leave the beams on that long. Yep, here we go. It's so predictable. It's almost boring, but it was hard to predict really which one they were going to bring it in, because it looked like they could have dragged it across to KLIX, because KLIX was feeding it, and so were some of the other ones, as we have shown. Look at that. I mean, that really just doesn't get any more like landfall into Doppler radar than like landfalling into KMOB. Just like that. Okay. Right. All that mass, all that it's not going over here. Didn't go to this one. Now we can see. Okay. So pretty. Look how just so perfect. Right into that line. It's picking it up there. Here we have KDGX, our third landfall in a row, going right into Doppler radar. This storm does not navigate except for where Doppler radar tells it to go. 3 for 3. Yet again. Gordon cataloged and documented. Oh, they're storm side, bringing it in. They're bringing it in. Here we go. Red facing the storm. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, baby. Yep. Ah, wow. Come on. You gotta admit. I mean, it's pretty freaking linked up, isn't it? And here she comes, and here she comes, and here she comes. Right on the line. Oh my God, she's beautiful. Isn't she? Man, these guys are good, man. 100 years they've kept this under wraps. Can you believe that shit? There's the 100 years, my friends. Can't really. Eyes dancing in that line of the red-green polarities. Beauty. That's 2 for 2, buddies. And it went backwards to do it. Like it was going up the coast, right? And then it's like went backwards. So, after tracking Tropical Storm Gordon proves it too was Doppler bait, as well as Florence, we take a pause from counting hurricanes to see when this preposterous accusation we make that Doppler radar is not only reading the atmosphere to discover these storms, but stimulating it and steering them at the very least, if not outright creating the weather events from scratch, along with other various elements to be discussed later in the series. We stop and ask ourselves, when did all this world of hot water begin for us? If I am making the claim, which the facts force me to make, that Doppler radar attracts the hurricanes, steering them by the eye, then I need to be able to say when all of this started or was first made possible. From my Weather War 101 interview, I had learned a few things. Whether I would end up concurring myself or not later would yet to be known at the time. The things I learned from that interview and a series of email exchanges with the anonymous producer of years' worth of radar and water vapor evidence documented and tied to severe weather events was: number one, that our hydrological cycle has been broken for years for a multitude of reasons, primarily the aerosolization of pollution and chemical contamination, which has dried up the natural hydrocycle as an accidental side effect of industry. Number two, that our weather is artificially infused on a daily basis via two main components. One, up to 70% of all energy created is released as massive water vapor from wet surface air coolers, WSACs, from power plant cooling towers into the atmosphere. Number two, this water vapor is then guided into areas of intent as doppler energy is used to navigate the storms to its target area, creating thousand-year floods whenever desired to. The complete how-to was written about in Weather War 101's book, No Natural Weather. Number three, that this was not only how severe weather was made on demand, but how daily weather was managed on a daily basis. At the time, it demoralized me to hear. Years as a chemtrail activist, and I had naively thought it was a few cloud seeding projects here and there, and now a global spraying programming involving fleets of planes. But now I'm finding out that the whole cycle has been hacked. The irony was that even though he criticized his opponents for not answering his claims and charges and of leaving his body of research and evidence standing undebunked, Weather War 101 did the very same thing to my 2017 discovery that the storms were being led by the eye directly. After warning me that I would come across a sea of gatekeepers and crickets when trying to present this work, he ended up being the one who did it to me. 2 times in a row, when I asked him what he thought about this exact discovered observation, he ignored me. The third and final time I asked him, he then proceeded to go AWOL from not only our conversation, but his channel and video uploads as well. Why? Was he retiring all of a sudden without answering my last question? Or did he have another reason for not answering? Then I thought about all the work he and I had put into trying to get the story out amongst the chemtrail community, only to have experienced it gatekept by some of the popular chemtrail leaders in it. Could all this gatekeeping and attacking of sheer radar data, which is the evidence for weaponized weather, be for a reason? If Weather War 101 was right, and our hydrological cycle got hacked by industry years ago, wouldn't they have put their goons up to control the narrative? Just the way all of the truth has been sized and parceled out between the population to fight over? Leaving out a few of the other gatekeepers' names, we'll pick on Dane Wigington, the founder of Geoengineering Watch and leading voice in the movement, since he has put himself into my direct line of truth fire by attempting to attack Weather War 101 after I helped expose his work, without actually addressing his work honestly. His own hit piece on the anthropogenic, man-made climate effects of power plants is evidence enough of that. All right, documenting the Geoengineering Watch, Dane Wigington self-exposure here he does with his disinfo piece. This guy's got 31 million visitors to his channel, okay? 31 million visitors have been given some facts about chemtrails, although he keeps the narrative very controlled. He's one of the people. I have a few problems with Dane Wigington. I actually spoke with him on the phone. He sent up red flags to me when he tried to tell me, when I was telling him I was neutral on the CO2 argument, because I was trying to be inclusive of all sides, trying to say if you care about CO2, if you think it's a hoax, one way or the other, the chemtrail issue is going to be relevant to you because it's an environmental issue, and it also shows the other side to why CO2 may be so tampered with, the whole CO2 narrative being pushed. Look, I'm no longer concerned about CO2 at all now that I have looked into it. I'm concerned about chemicals and the aerosolization of pollution and microwave technology less so actually concerned about the infusing of water vapor um, into the atmosphere. I mean, I'm not scared of water vapor either. It's just the fact that we have dried out everything else everywhere else so that now these guys are able to steal and hack the hydrological cycle to their liking. They steal the rain naturally from everyone else and then they just produce it where they're sending it. And this is, I believe this is deliberate. This is where I differ from Weather War 101. He says it's a natural side effect of industry, 100 years of polluting, and I'm sure there is some of that. But on an intelligent level, these guys know what they were doing. They knew they were drying out the rain. They knew what they were doing. When they're hiding pollution by making it into a nanoparticulate, they know what they're doing. They're allowing it to come into your own body to pass the blood-brain barrier because it's so small, there's nothing to stop it. But you can't really measure it in the sky because there's nobody measuring ultrafine particles. So I'm not really concerned about water vapor. CO2 levels go back to normal when you replace the microbes in the soil after 2 to 3 years. So stop polluting and destroying all life on Earth, and then, our CO2 levels will go back to normal. But if you want to stop climate change and climate engineering, stop aerosolizing the hell out of everything. Stop with the chemical fertilizers and all that. Let's stop with the protection of the chemical industry. The FDA used to be the Bureau of Chemistry. Their only job, it's not to protect the people, it's to protect the companies from liability, giving them limited liability. So here's a whole institution that I believe was set up as an extension of industry profits and interests. So cooling towers for weather modification water source, absolute nonsense. Look at that absolute nonsense. So like even questioning this is like just ridiculous. Don't even think about it. Don't even think about it. Producing cloud-seeding particles from ground level for weather modification purposes is not only possible, but regularly practiced. Supplying the colossal quantities of water needed to form, fuel an event, and feed even the smallest of precipitation events is another matter altogether. Okay, I've had a number of people request that I address the completely false information conclusions being propagated by some sources and individuals who are stating that power plant cooling towers are being used as a primary or major source of atmospheric moisture for climate modification. I have not written about this disinformation until now, as the cooling tower conclusion is so ludicrous and so mathematically impossible that I felt it did not actually need to be debunked. This being said, some published photos and videos with completely false conclusions of the steam plumes above cooling towers could lead to confusion for those that have actually investigated or done the math. I have personally worked on cooling towers for Bechtel Power over 3 decades ago. I have personally worked on cooling towers for Bechtel Power over 3 decades ago. I have personally worked on cooling tower for Bechtel Power over 3 decades ago. This article was written in 2014. 2004 was 10 years ago. 1994 was 20. 1984 was 30 years ago from the time this article was written. They were studying inadvertent weather modification from cooling towers in the 60s. They have documents showing seeding over cooling towers from 1965, Dane. You should have known by then if you're into weather modification and cooling towers. Oh, and never mind that on your page, our dear Garrick Wood, beloved you are, Garrick, posted a patent. Method for weather modification and vapor generator for weather modification. A nuclear fusion reactor or nuclear fission reactor is used as a heat source, a heat exchanger that contains water to be heated. Is used for water vapor generation. Okay, that was in 2006, so that was before your article was written. And even beyond that, we have more. But more on power plants in another episode where we will explore the subject more deliberately and in greater detail. The irony being, in another failed debunk coup, Metabunk brings up my actual name and then attacks Dane's claims and logic, whom I publicly separated myself from. What was up with all these intellectually dishonest attacks? Were we so close to the truth that the bad guys had nothing more than insults, name-calling, and outright omissions to offer, since there was no proper debunk for what we were proving using radar and satellite data on a regular basis? Well, if you had hijacked the hydrological cycle, wouldn't you want to make sure your boys were on the landscape of the climate change narrative, making sure no one got close to the real inconvenient facts? And just what are the inconvenient facts, Raphael? What are you saying, crazy girl? The Doppler radar steers the hurricanes around by the eye? You couldn't even get Weather War 101 to acknowledge this fact directly. In fact, if anything, he told you to stay away from Doppler, but to focus on power plants instead. Why? People who attempt to herd my consciousness in any way send up an immediate red flag on my radar. Never giving me an answer as to why, he simply disappeared. So, when did all this radar steering start? When was Doppler radar created, and when did it roll out? The Doppler radar rolled out in 3 phases: 1957 Doppler, then in 1974, and then finally the 1988 Doppler radar, aka NEXRAD, as in Next Generation Doppler Radar.
This video is a short history of the WSR-57 radar that was installed in Evansville, Indiana. Installation began in December 1959. It was one of the first 31 radars to be installed across the country. Evansville was in the group that included other locations such as Washington, D.C., Sacramento, California, St. Louis, Missouri, and Little Rock, Arkansas, to name a few. By the time the deployment was complete, which was not until the early 1970s, there were 66 WSR-57 radars across the country. The 76-foot tower was erected at Dress Regional Airport, next to Highway 41 on the north side of Evansville. The wavelength was 10 centimeters, and the maximum range was 250 nautical miles. The 12-foot diameter dish was designed to output 500 kilowatts of power, although it usually ran with less. You can see that the dish was put up on the deck first, then the dome was put over the dish to protect it from the elements. The original cost of the radar was about $150,000. In 2012 dollars, though, that would be about $1.2 million. Now, since the radar was operational for 37 years, I would say we got our money's worth.
The WSR-57 radars were the USA's main weather surveillance radar for over 35 years. The National Weather Service operated a network of this model radar across the country, watching for severe weather. The WSR-57 Weather Surveillance Radar 1957 was the first modern weather radar. Initially commissioned at the Miami Hurricane Forecast Center, the WSR-57 was installed in other parts of the CONUS, continental United States. The WSR-57 was the first generation of radars designed expressly for a national warning network. The WSR-57 was designed in 1957 using World War II technology. The WSR-57 was designed in 1957 using World War II technology. It gave only coarse reflectivity data and no velocity data, which made it extremely difficult to predict tornadoes. NOAA has interesting pictures of the Charleston, South Carolina WSR-57 radar image of Hurricane Hugo in 1989. At the National Hurricane Center, Hurricane Andrew in 1992 blew the WSR-57 dish off their roof. How ironic. The original WSR-57 dish was blown off and replaced by the 1988 Doppler radar. The NHC report on Hurricane Andrew shows its last radar image, as well as images from the nearby WSR-88 radars. As the network of WSR-57 radars aged, some were replaced with WSR-74 models of similar performance but with better reliability. 128 of the WSR-57 and WSR-74 model radars were spread across the country as the National Weather Service radar network until the 1990s. They were gradually replaced by the WSR-88D model, consisting of the NEXRAD network. The last WSR-57 radar in the United States was decommissioned on December 2nd, 1996. Some have been sold to other countries like Australia, Greece, and Pakistan. Well, we know Australia has some crazy weather. There are two types in the WSR-74 series, which are almost identical except for the operating frequency. The WSR-74, used for local warnings, operates in the C-band, and the WSR-74S, used in the national network, operates in the S-band, like the WSR-57 and the current WSR-88D. S-band frequencies are better suited because they are not attenuated significantly in heavy rain, while the C-band is strongly attenuated. The WSR-74C uses a wavelength of 5.4 centimeters. It also has a dish diameter of 8 feet and a maximum range of 313 nautical miles, as it was used only for reflectivities. See Doppler dilemma. Here we have a list. Later on, we will go back and see if any of our tornadoes line up with any of these Doppler dates. NEXRAD, or NEXRAD Next Generation Radar, is a network of 159 high-resolution S-band Doppler weather radars operated by the National Weather Service, an agency of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, within the United States Department of Commerce, the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, within the Department of Transportation, and the U.S. Air Force, within the Department of Defense. NEXRAD detects precipitation and atmospheric movements or wind. It returns data, which when processed can be displayed in a mosaic map which shows patterns of precipitation and its movement. The radar system operates in two basic modes, selectable by the operator, which is not on location, I'll have you know. A slow scanning, clear air mode for analyzing air movements when there is little or no activity in the area, and a precipitation mode with a faster scan for tracking active weather. NEXRAD has an increased emphasis on automation, including the use of algorithms and automated volume scans. Deployment. In the 1970s, the U.S. Department of Commerce, Defense, and Transportation agreed that to better serve their operational needs, the existing national radar network needed to be replaced. The Joint Doppler Operational Project, JTDOP, was formed in 1976 at the National Severe Storms Laboratory to study the usefulness of using Doppler radar to identify severe and tornadic thunderstorms. Tests over the next 3 years conducted by the National Weather Service and the Air Weather Service Agency of the U.S. Air Force found that Doppler radar provided much improved early detection of severe thunderstorms. A working group that included the JDOP published a paper providing the concepts for the development and operation of a national weather radar network. In 1979, the NEXRAD Joint Systems Program Office was formed to move forward with the development and deployment of the proposed NEXRAD radar network. That year, the NSSL completed a formal report on developing the NEXRAD system. Installation of an operational prototype was completed in the fall of 1990 in Norman, Oklahoma. The first installation of WSR-88D for operational use in everyday forecasting was in Sterling, Virginia on June 12, 1992. The last system deployed as part of the installation campaign was installed in North Webster, Indiana on August 30th, 1997. In 2011, the new Langley Hill NEXRAD was added at Langley Hill, Washington, to better cover the Pacific coast of that area. Other radars also filled gaps in coverage at Evansville, Indiana, and Fort Smith, Arkansas, following the initial installations. The NEXRAD radars also provided volumetric scans of the atmosphere, allowing operators to interrogate the vertical structure of storms, and additionally can act as wind profilers in providing detailed wind information for several kilometers above the radar site. The radars also had a much increased range, allowing a detection of weather features at much greater distances from the radar site. WSR-88D development, maintenance, and training are coordinated by the NEXRAD Radar Operations Center, located at the National Weather Center in Norman, Oklahoma. So I begin to look over the list of the United States hurricanes by state and to see if there was some sort of pattern I could make out. As that was a little bit overwhelming at first, and I did notice that after a certain time, the hurricanes would start getting named. It was in the 50s, 56, 57. I noticed that it was right around the time that the 1957 Doppler radar rolled out. Now, could the technology have been around before 1957? 1956, 1957. Could there have been experimentation? 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. We have her category 5, category 3, 3, 3. Mostly threes. Few ones. It does seem overwhelming, but then I remembered that Dutch sense was originally talking about harp rings and tornadoes. Now, could those harp rings have been Doppler related? As we know now, there has been a lot of gatekeeping, so there were probably tornadoes involved with the early experimentation of directed energy weaponry. Now, these are all hunches, yes. This is intuition based, yes. So let's see what history offers us up that matches our intuition or stops it and proves it to be foolishness. So here's a tornado timeline. There's one great notches tornado in 1840. These are historic world history projects. Historic tornadoes. There was the Mattoon tornado of 1917. And then the next one of note is in 1947. But it is sometime after the development of radar, which was developed in the 30s. So sometime between the development of radar and the naming of the storms, there could have been a lot more experimentation. I am not sure. I cannot make that claim just yet. I'm keeping open so that I can see the landscape as it is. Because obviously we've been lied to. We've proven that. I mean, I want to go back and debunk that, but I haven't been able to. Because that's the fact. We've been lied to. So this has sprung up in our midst at some point in time. So, is it here? It is in 1957 Mid-South tornado outbreak. Warner Robin tornadoes. Glacier Higgins Woodward's tornadoes of 1947. Let's check out the Mattoon tornado of 1917. The funnel of the tornado, May 26, 1917, first appeared at noon, just west of a small town of southeast of Quincy. Wilson and Shagnon, 1971. It moved east along a remarkably straight line, creating damages in several small towns and many farms. The tornado then struck and badly damaged both Mattoon and Charleston. At one time, the series of tornadoes, which struck nearly a straight line from near the town of Louisiana, Missouri to near Mount Vernon, Indiana, was considered a single tornado, lasting 7 hours and 40 minutes over a 293-mile path through 3 states. This tornado held records for the longest tornado track as well as the longest lasting tornado. However, it is now generally accepted that this was a family of at least 4, generally accepted, and possibly 8 or more separate tornadoes with either short breaks in the damaged path or sections of straight line wind damage connecting the tornado paths. The most severe damage was in this, with sections of straight line wind damage connecting the tornado paths. The most severe damage was the cities of Mattoon and Charleston. There you have it. So, it moved east along a remarkably straight line. It moved east along a remarkably straight line. Well, this is very striking, isn't it? Okay, let's check out this straight line on a map, shall we? Mattoon tornado. That's Charleston, right? And Louisiana. Now let's find Charleston. Charleston Avenue. Charleston. But you can see there's Mattoon and Charleston, so it's pretty much in that, right? That's right. This map is in the right relationship to this map, right? So this was the straight line over here, right? Well, so this is a straight line in Indiana, right? It was slightly curved upwards. Now let's look at where, here's where it starts to get interesting. I just Googled Tesla, and 1917, Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower destroyed. Tesla timeline. There goes. Wardenclyffe Tower demolished on July 4th, 1917. And when was the Mattoon tornado? May 26th. Just enough time to realize how bad of a devastation there was in May, June, July, to have then brought down the tower. Well, look, that's a lot of theorizing, Raphael. It's a lot of theorizing, though, isn't it? The Wardenclyffe Tower, the Mattoon, Indiana and Illinois, right? Indiana and Illinois. Straight line that was going up just a little bit. Ha! Ha! How you like that for directed energy, huh? So I discovered that the Wardenclyffe Tower is shut down just a few months after the Mattoon tornado because I had some intuitive feeling about a straight line which happens to line up remarkably straight line. Remarkably straight line. Well, I wonder what else we can find. Realizing that our coincidences were starting to get interesting, I realized I had to go back even further with Tesla. Was this the first? When did this start? How far back does the story go? How much of the past has to be rewritten to fill in the overwhelming evidence today and to justify this world of gatekeeping? I decided to dive deeper into research, and what I discovered would be even more revealing and confirming that our weather has indeed been hacked, our hydrological cycle hijacked, and that we are most certainly in a world of hot water today. Join us again when we dive deep into the world that was Tesla and look at his experiments, both praised and repressed, and as we shall see, exploited too. To be continued. But instinct is something which transcends knowledge. We have, undoubtedly, certain fine fibers that enable us to perceive truths when logical deduction or any other willful effort of the brain is futile. Nikola Tesla.